The first time I met Vanessa, she looked right through me. Not with malice. Malice would have been easier to recognize, easier to defend against. She looked through me the way you look through a window, acknowledging my existence only as something transparent, something that light passed through on its way to something more interesting. I was standing in my kitchen, wiping flour from my hands, when my son Michael brought her through the back door. It was a Sunday in March, the kind of damp gray afternoon that makes you grateful for a warm house and the smell of bread baking. I had spent the morning making Michael's favorite East sourdough, the recipe my mother had taught me, the recipe I had made for him every week since he was old enough to chew. "Mom," Michael said, his voice carrying that particular excitement I hadn't heard since he was 12 and had built his first soapbox car. "This is Vanessa. Vanessa, this is my mom, Helen." I wiped my hands on my apron and extended one, still warm from the oven. Vanessa took it with the tips of her fingers, barely touching, her manicured nails. Pale pink, perfect ovals, grazing my palm like she was afraid of contamination. "Helen," she said. Not a question, not a greeting. Just my name, delivered with a small smile that didn't reach her hazel eyes. "Michael talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know everything." Everything. The word hung in the air, weighted with something I couldn't name. I looked at Michael. My Michael. 26 years old, broad-shouldered and handsome in the way his father had been before. The drinking took the handsome and left only the broad shoulders and the bitterness. He was looking at Vanessa with an expression I recognized from his childhood. The look he got when he wanted something badly enough to believe any promise that led to it. "Well," I said, pulling my hand back, "I hope he left out the embarrassing parts. The time he tried to shave at age 4, or the science fair volcano that exploded all over Principal Henderson." Vanessa's smile flickered. Just for a second, a micro-expression, the kind I had learned to read during 20 years of teaching high school English. 20 years of watching teenagers perform emotions they hadn't yet learned to feel. Boredom, impatience, the smile of someone who had expected to be entertained and was instead being subjected to someone else's nostalgia. "Michael tells me you're a teacher," she said. "Retired now, right? That must be nice. All that free time." "It is," I said. "Though I stay busy. Volunteering at the library, the community garden. And I still tutor. Mostly kids who need help with college essays." "How fulfilling." She turned to Michael, dismissing me with the efficiency of someone who had practiced the maneuver many times. "Babe, you said there was a view from the back deck?" Michael shot me an apologetic look. The same look he had given me at age 8 when he broke my favorite vase. At age 15 when he stole $20 from my purse. At age 20 when he dropped out of college for the second time. The look that said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to do what I want anyway." "Yeah, the deck," he said. "Mom, we'll be back in a minute. Vanessa wants to see the property line. We're thinking about, well, we'll tell you later." They went out the sliding door, Vanessa's heels clicking on the deck boards, Michael's voice low and eager. I stood in my kitchen, flour on my apron, the smell of sourdough turning heavy and wrong, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not jealousy. I had never been jealous of Michael's girlfriends, not the high school cheerleader, not the college activist, not the aspiring actress who had broken his heart so thoroughly that he had come home for 6 months and slept in his childhood bed like a wounded animal. I wanted him to love and be loved. I wanted him to find someone who saw what I saw. The kindness underneath the mistakes, the steadiness underneath the impulsiveness. The man he was becoming if someone would just give him time and patience and faith. But Vanessa didn't see any of that. Vanessa saw Michael the way you see a tool, something useful, something that could be wielded, something that existed to serve a purpose you had already determined. I knew it in that first minute, and I spent the next year trying to convince myself I was wrong. Michael and Vanessa got engaged 8 months later. He proposed on a trip to Napa. The ring, he told me excitedly over the phone, cost $6,000. Almost everything I had saved, but she's worth it, Mom. She's so worth it. I didn't ask how he had $6,000. I knew the answer. He didn't. He had credit cards, and a job at his uncle's construction company that paid enough to keep him in beer and gas, but not enough to build savings, and a history of financial decisions that ranged from questionable to catastrophic. The ring was probably on a payment plan, or borrowed from his uncle, or, worse, from Vanessa herself, a loan disguised as a gift that would come due with interest. That's wonderful, Michael, I said. I'm happy for you. When do I get to meet her family? Oh. The pause was brief, but I caught it. Vanessa's parents are complicated. Her mom lives in Florida, doesn't really travel. Her dad, they don't talk. It's just going to be us, mostly. Small wedding. Intimate. Intimate. The word people used when they couldn't afford big, or when they were hiding something, or when they wanted to control the guest list so completely that no one could witness what was really happening. Well, I said, whatever you decide, I'm here. You know that. I know, Mom. You're the best. Vanessa knows it too. She really respects you. She told me so. I held the phone after he hung up, staring at the sourdough recipe on my counter, the handwriting faded, the paper soft with age. She really respects you. The lie was so transparent it was almost touching. Vanessa didn't respect me. Vanessa didn't even see me. But Michael needed to believe she did, and so he had manufactured the sentiment and delivered it with the earnestness of a child bringing home a drawing of a sun with a smiley face. I put the recipe away. I started a new loaf. And I told myself that I was being cynical, that I was projecting my own loneliness onto my son's happiness, that Vanessa was probably lovely once you got to know her, that every mother feels this way when her son falls in love. I told myself that for 8 more months. Until the engagement party. The party was Vanessa's idea, though she had delegated the execution to a professional planner whose fees, I learned later, cost more than my monthly pension. It was held at a restaurant downtown. Not the kind of place I would have chosen, not the kind of place Michael would have chosen, but the kind of place Vanessa chose. Sleek, modern, all concrete and exposed bulbs and plates the size of saucers with food arranged like abstract sculpture. I arrived early, as I always do. I was wearing the dress I had bought for the occasion. Navy blue, modest, the kind of dress that said I am the mother of the groom, and I am here to support my son without screaming for attention. I had spent 3 hours at the department store trying on options, discarding anything too young, too old, too flashy, too drab. I wanted to look right. I wanted to be invisible in the right way, present but not intrusive, supportive but not demanding. The perfect background to Vanessa's perfect foreground. The restaurant was already decorated when I arrived. White flowers everywhere. Peonies, I thought. Or maybe ranunculus. Something expensive and delicate that would wilt by midnight. A banner that read, Michael and Vanessa in gold script. A photographer setting up lighting in the corner, preparing to capture every moment of this celebration of a love I still wasn't sure existed. Vanessa was at the bar, surrounded by friends I didn't recognize. Young women in dresses that cost more than my car payment, laughing at something Vanessa was saying, their faces turned toward her like flowers toward the sun. She saw me. I know she saw me. Our eyes met across the room. But she didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't make any gesture of welcome. She just turned back to her friends and continued whatever story she was telling, her hands moving, her laugh carrying, her presence filling the space she had decided I didn't occupy. I found a corner table and sat down. I ordered sparkling water from a waiter who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. I watched the room fill with Vanessa's people, her co-workers, her college friends, her yoga instructor, her hairdresser. A small army of attractive young professionals who all seemed to know each other and none of whom seemed to know Michael, let alone me. Michael arrived at 7:45 minutes after the invitation had said 6. He looked handsome in a blazer I didn't recognize. New, I guessed, bought for the occasion, probably on credit. He scanned the room, found Vanessa, lit up like a child on Christmas morning, and went to her. She accepted his kiss on the cheek with the tolerance of a queen receiving a subject, patted his arm, and returned to her conversation without introducing him to anyone around her. I watched him stand there, hovering at the edge of her circle, trying to insert himself into a world that had no room for him. I watched his smile falter, then recover, then falter again. I watched him scan the room, find me, and wave with the desperate relief of a drowning man spotting a life preserver. "Mom!" He crossed the room, sat down across from me, his face flushed with champagne and anxiety. "You made it. I wasn't sure. Vanessa said you might not feel comfortable, with the crowd and everything." "I feel fine," I said. "Though I should mention, I don't see anyone from our side. Your uncle? Your cousins? Your friends from high school?" "Oh." Michael looked away, suddenly interested in the abstract sculpture on his plate. "Vanessa wanted to keep it small. Just her people mostly. She said our side could come to the wedding. This is more of a professional networking thing for her." Professional networking? For an engagement party? I looked at my son, at the man who had once cried because his soccer team lost a championship, who had stayed up all night with me when his father finally drank himself into a grave, who had promised at age 10 that he would always take care of me because I was the only person who had ever taken care of him. "Michael," I said softly, "are you happy?" He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months, maybe years, and I saw something in his brown eyes. My eyes, the eyes his father had always said made him look weak, that broke my heart. Fear, not of me, of himself, of the answer to my question. "Vanessa is great, Mom," he said. His voice was too loud, too bright, performing for an audience that wasn't there. "She's ambitious, she's smart, she's going places, and she chose me. Out of everyone, she chose me. That's happiness, right? Being chosen?" I opened my mouth to answer, to say something about love being more than selection, about partnership being more than gratitude, about the difference between being chosen and being valued. But Vanessa was there suddenly, materializing beside our table like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Michael, babe, there you are." She didn't look at me. "Everyone's asking about the honeymoon plans. Come tell them about Bali." "Vanessa, I was just talking to my mom." "Your mom will be fine." Finally, she looked at me. A glance, a flicker, the assessment of someone calculating whether I was worth the effort of pretense. "Won't you, Helen? You look so comfortable there. Like you belong in corners." The words were delivered with a smile, the same smile she had given me in my kitchen, the smile that didn't reach her eyes. But the edge was sharper now, sharpened by champagne and the confidence of a room full of her people, the certainty that no one would call her out, that I was too polite, too eager to be liked, too trained by decades of teaching to maintain peace at any cost. "Vanessa," Michael said. His voice was low, embarrassed, the voice of a man who had heard the insult but was hoping I hadn't. "It's fine," I said. My voice was steady. I had spent 20 years in classrooms where teenagers tested boundaries with far more creativity than this. "You go, Michael. I'll be here." He stood, hesitant, looking back and forth between us like a child caught in a custody battle. Vanessa took his arm, her fingers digging into his blazer, and pulled him toward her circle. He went. Of course he went. He had been going toward women who pulled him since he was old enough to walk. I sat alone. The party swirled around me, Vanessa's laughter, Michael's nervous attempts at conversation, the photographer's flash, the clink of glasses, the rising volume of alcohol and self-congratulation. I ate the abstract sculpture on my plate. Some kind of fish, I thought, or maybe chicken, disguised beneath foam and microgreens, and I watched my son disappear into the orbit of a woman who had decided I was furniture. At 9, the speeches began. Vanessa's maid of honor, A woman named Brittany with the vocal fry of a generation and the confidence of someone who had never been told no, stood up and delivered a 10-minute monologue about Vanessa's greatness, her ambition, her impeccable taste, her ability to curate a life that inspires everyone around her. Michael was mentioned twice, as the lucky guy who finally caught her, and as proof that Vanessa can see potential where others see, well, less. The room laughed. Michael laughed. Too loud, too eager. I didn't laugh. Then Vanessa stood up. She tapped her glass with a knife, the crystal ringing clear and sharp, and the room fell into a hush of anticipation. I want to thank everyone for being here, she said. This means so much to me. To us. A glance at Michael, who beamed like a spotlight had been turned on him. But before we celebrate, I want to acknowledge something. Something important. She looked around the room, her hazel eyes sweeping past me without stopping, as if my table were empty, as if I were a coat left on a chair. Family, she said, drawing out the word like it tasted of something rare and precious. Family is everything, and I am so grateful to be gaining a new one, Michael's people. Another glance at Michael, who was nodding eagerly. His uncle, his cousins, the wonderful community that raised him. She paused. The room was silent, waiting for the pivot, the turn, the knife. But I also want to be honest about boundaries, about what family means and what it doesn't. Michael and I are building something new, something modern, and part of that means recognizing that not everyone who claims a title deserves it. Not everyone who gave birth to someone has a right to their life. Not everyone who calls themselves mother is actually family. The room was frozen. I could feel eyes turning toward me, the slow, horrified realization of what was happening. Vanessa's smile was radiant, triumphant, the smile of a woman who had waited for this moment, who had planned it, who had probably rehearsed it in front of a mirror. So, to those people, she looked directly at me now, her eyes bright with malice and champagne, to those people who think that blood gives them rights, who think that showing up at a party makes them important, who think that they can just insert themselves into lives they've never really been part of. I say this. You're not even family. You're just background, decoration, something to be tolerated until the real family arrives. She raised her glass. To real family, to chosen family, to the people who actually matter. The room was dead silent. No one moved. No one drank. I could see Brittany's face, frozen in a smile that had become a rictus of embarrassment. I could see Michael, his face white, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I could see the waiter who had served me my sparkling water, standing by the kitchen door, his eyes wide with the horrified fascination of a spectator at a car crash. And I could see Vanessa, standing there with her glass raised, waiting for the applause that wasn't coming, waiting for the validation she had expected, the confirmation that her cruelty was clever, that her humiliation of a 62-year-old woman in front of a room full of strangers was somehow brave. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound shockingly loud in the silence. I picked up my glass, still full of sparkling water, the bubbles long gone flat, and I raised it. Perfect, I said. My voice was steady, clear. The voice I had used in classrooms for 20 years, the voice that could cut through teenage chatter and command attention without shouting. Perfect, I repeated. Because if I'm not family, Vanessa, then you won't mind if I stop acting like I am. If I stop paying for things that family pays for. If I stop signing documents that family signs. If I stop pretending that the woman who raised the man you're marrying is somehow irrelevant to the life you're trying to build. I took a sip of my water. The room was breathing again, shallow and careful, everyone aware that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. So here's my toast, I said. To boundaries, to honesty, to finally understanding exactly where I stand. You say I'm not family? Fine. Then don't ask me for money. Don't ask me to co-sign your mortgage. Don't ask me to put my house up as collateral for your business loan. Don't ask me for the $80,000 you've already taken from my accounts over the past 6 months, using documents you forged with my signature. The glass trembled in my hand. Not from fear, from rage, from the rage of a woman who had discovered betrayal piece by piece, who had spent weeks gathering evidence, who had come to this party hoping, desperately, foolishly hoping, that she was wrong. Because that's what not family means, Vanessa. It means no access, no trust, no more pretending that your smiles are real and your gratitude is genuine. It means I treat you exactly like what you are, a stranger who tried to steal from me. I set down my glass. The room was utterly silent now, the kind of silence that follows an explosion, when the air is too thin to carry sound. And since we're being honest, I continued, I should mention that my lawyer is here. Harold, would you join us? The restaurant door opened. Harold Vance, 70 years old, sharp as a blade, my attorney for 30 years, the man who had helped me navigate my husband's death and my retirement, and every legal question in between, walked in. He was carrying a leather folder. His face was grave. Helen, he said, I have the documents you requested. Thank you, Harold. I turned to Vanessa, who had gone from triumphant to ashen in the space of a minute, her glass still raised, her smile fossilized into something grotesque. These are copies of the loan applications you submitted using my forged signature, the bank statements showing transfers from my account to yours, the emails you sent to your friend at the mortgage company, discussing how to handle the old lady's assets once Michael and I were officially estranged. I walked toward her. I had never felt more powerful in my life. 62 years old, 5'4", wearing a navy dress from a department store sale, and I was the most dangerous person in this room. And this, I said, pulling the final document from Harold's folder, is a police report, filed 20 minutes ago, before I walked in here. Forgery, fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. The detective is waiting outside. Vanessa. He has a warrant. Michael made a sound, a strangled noise, part protest, part disbelief, part the dawning horror of a man realizing that the life he had built was constructed on a foundation of lies and theft and his own willful blindness. Mom, he whispered. Mom. No. You can't. This is a mistake. Vanessa wouldn't. She loves me. She loves your access to me, I said. I didn't look at him. I couldn't look at him, not without breaking, not without becoming the mother who had failed to protect him from his own desperate need to be chosen. She loves the house I paid off, the retirement account I built, the credit line she opened in my name. She loves what I can give her, Michael. Not what you can give her. What I can give her. Because you can't give her anything, can you? You never could. And instead of seeing that as a problem, she saw it as an opportunity. Vanessa's glass finally fell. It hit the floor with a crystalline shatter, champagne spraying across the concrete, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. She was shaking now, all her perfect composure stripped away, revealing the terrified, cornered animal underneath. You can't prove anything, she said. Her voice was high, shrill, the voice of a woman who had never been told no and didn't know how to process it. Those documents are fake. They're... Michael, tell her. Tell your mother she's crazy. She's always been jealous of me. She's... Mrs. Reed? A man in a suit had appeared at the restaurant door. Plain clothes, professional. The kind of man who had seen this scene before and would see it again. I'm Detective Morrison. I need you to come with me. Vanessa looked at Michael, at me, at the room full of her friends, who were staring at her with expressions ranging from horror to fascination to the careful neutrality of people already planning how to distance themselves from the scandal. Michael, she whispered, do something, say something, tell them. But Michael was frozen. My son, my beautiful, broken son, stood in the middle of the restaurant with his hands at his sides and his face white and his eyes empty of everything except the terrible, dawning understanding that he had been used, that his love had been currency, that his mother's warning, the one he had dismissed as jealousy, as bitterness, as the inability to be happy for him, had been the only truth in a year of lies. He said nothing. He did nothing. He just stood there, while the detective put Vanessa in handcuffs, while she started to cry, while her friends began to whisper and film and text, while the engagement party became a crime scene and a viral moment, and the end of everything. I watched them take her away. I watched the restaurant empty, Vanessa's people fleeing like rats from a sinking ship, leaving behind half-eaten sculptures and abandoned coats and the wreckage of an evening that had started with cruelty and ended with justice. And then I watched my son collapse into a chair, put his head in his hands, and begin to sob. I took him home. Not to Vanessa's apartment. I would learn later that it was sublet, paid for by me through the forged loan applications, but to my house. The house on Maple Street where I had raised him, where the sourdough was still warm in the kitchen, and the back deck looked out on a property line that had never mattered to anyone but Vanessa. He didn't speak for 3 days. He sat in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, eating only when I brought food, sleeping only when exhaustion took him. I didn't push. I had spent 20 years teaching teenagers, and I knew that some lessons couldn't be taught. They had to be learned through pain, through failure, through the slow, grinding process of realizing that the world was not the story you had told yourself. On the 4th day, he came downstairs. He was unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing pajamas I didn't recognize, probably Vanessa's purchase, part of the wardrobe she had curated for him, the man she had wanted him to be. "Mom," he said. His voice was rough, unused. "I need to know. How long? How long did you know?" I was at the kitchen table grading essays for the tutoring program. A habit, a routine, something to keep my hands busy while my heart was breaking. I set down my red pen. 6 months, I said. Since the first loan application. The bank called me to confirm. Standard procedure for large transfers. I hadn't applied for any loan, but the signature looked like mine, and the paperwork was convincing enough that they almost processed it. Almost. "And you didn't tell me?" I looked at him. At my son, who had stood in that restaurant and watched his fiancée be arrested, who had done nothing while she was led away in handcuffs, who had spent 3 days in silence while his world collapsed. "I tried, Michael. The night you told me about the engagement, I asked if you were happy. I asked if you had seen her financial records, if you knew about her debts, if you understood what you were getting into. You told me she was going places. You told me she had chosen you. You didn't want to hear what I had to say." He sat down across from me, the same chair he had sat in at age 4, at age 10, at age 15, when he told me he was dropping out of college for the first time. The chair where I had listened to every confession, every excuse, every promise that this time would be different. "I didn't want to hear it," he admitted, "because if you were right, if she was using me, using us, then what did that say about me? That I was so desperate to be chosen that I couldn't see what was obvious? That I was so lonely that I let someone steal from my own mother just to feel loved?" He put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook, and I watched him cry. Not the performative tears of a child seeking attention, but the deep, racking sobs of a man confronting the wreckage of his own choices. "I saw it," he whispered. "I saw things. The way she talked about money, the way she handled your credit card at restaurants, the way she forgot to pay me back for things. But I told myself it was normal, that couples shared expenses, that she was just bad with money, like I was, that together we would figure it out." He looked up. His eyes were red, swollen, but there was something new in them, something hard, something that hadn't been there before. "She told me you were jealous, that you couldn't stand to see me happy because you were alone, that you wanted to control me, keep me dependent, make sure I never had a life outside of you." And I believed her, Mom. I wanted to believe her. because it was easier than admitting that I had chosen someone who saw me as a means to an end. I reached across the table. I took his hand, the hand that had once been small enough to hold in mine, that had grown into a man's hand, rough from construction work, trembling now with the aftermath of betrayal. You were never a means to an end, Michael. Not to me, not to anyone who truly loved you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I didn't fight harder, that I let my fear of losing you keep me from protecting you. I should have told you about the loans the moment I found out. I should have confronted Vanessa, exposed her, done whatever it took. But I was scared. Scared that you would choose her over me. Scared that I would lose the only person I had left. He gripped my hand. Hard, desperate, the grip of a drowning man. You didn't lose me, he said. I lost myself. And I'm going to have to find my way back. I don't know how long that takes. I don't know if I can ever. He stopped, his voice breaking. If I can ever look at you without seeing what I let happen. What I chose not to see. Then we'll look together, I said. One day at a time. One conversation at a time. However long it takes. The legal process took 18 months. Vanessa pled guilty to fraud and identity theft. The evidence was overwhelming. The documents Harold had gathered irrefutable. She served 14 months in a minimum security facility, emerged with a record and a reputation in ruins, and moved to another state where, I heard later, she was working as a receptionist and telling anyone who would listen that she had been framed by a vindictive mother-in-law. I didn't care. I had my money back. Most of it, after legal fees and restitution negotiations. I had my house, my savings, my carefully built life. I had the sourdough recipe, and the back deck, and the community garden, and the tutoring program, and all the small, real things that Vanessa had tried to take from me. And I had my son. Not completely. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way I had imagined when he was small, and I was his whole world. But he was there. He was trying. He was in therapy, working through the patterns that had led him to Vanessa. The need to be chosen. The inability to see manipulation disguised as love. He moved back into his childhood bedroom for 6 months, then found his own apartment. Small, modest, paid for with his own wages from the construction company. He started saving money. He started saying no to people who asked for things he couldn't give. He started learning, slowly and painfully, that love wasn't about being chosen. It was about choosing, every day, to be someone worth loving. On the anniversary of the engagement party, he came over for dinner. I made sourdough. The recipe. My mother's recipe. The one I had made for him every week of his life. We ate on the back deck, watching the sunset, not talking much, just being together in the quiet way that real family is. Mom, he said, as the light faded and the fireflies began to flicker in the grass. Do you ever regret it? What you did at the party? The arrest? The scandal? I know it cost you. Friends who took Vanessa's side, people who said you went too far, that you should have handled it privately. I thought about it. I thought about the restaurant, the silence, the glass shattering on the concrete. I thought about Vanessa's face, the transition from triumph to terror, the moment she realized that the woman she had dismissed as irrelevant had been her undoing. I regret that it was necessary, I said. I regret that you were hurt. I regret that I couldn't protect you from the truth in a gentler way. But do I regret standing up for myself? For saying no to someone who thought she could take everything from me and still demand my gratitude? I shook my head. No, Michael, I don't regret that. Not for a second. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something that glinted in the fading light. A ring. Simple. Gold. Nothing like the $6,000 engagement ring that had been returned to the jeweler after Vanessa's arrest. I bought this last week, he said. His voice was shy, uncertain. The voice of a man venturing into territory he wasn't sure he deserved. Not for anyone, just for me. A reminder. that I'm enough, that I don't need to be chosen by someone like Vanessa to be worth something, that the only person who needs to choose me is me. He slipped the ring on his finger. It caught the last light of the sunset, glowing warm and steady, a small circle of gold that meant more than any diamond ever could. I choose you too, Michael, I said. I always have. Even when you couldn't see it, even when I was afraid to show it, I choose you. Not because you're my son, not because of blood or obligation or any of the things Vanessa tried to weaponize. I choose you because you're worth choosing, because you're kind and you're trying, and you're becoming the man I always knew you could be. He looked at me. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. A real smile, small and tentative, the smile of a child testing a frozen pond and finding that it held. Thanks, Mom, he said. We sat on the deck as the stars came out, the fireflies dancing around us, the sourdough cooling on the kitchen counter. The world was quiet, and the world was real, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because I had won, not because I had defeated Vanessa, or proven myself, or shown the world that Helen Chen was not to be underestimated, but because I had finally learned what family really meant. Not blood, not obligation, not the performance of love that Vanessa had demanded and I had almost given. Family was choice. Every day, every moment, the choice to show up, to stand up, to be there even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when the person you loved couldn't see what you were doing for them. I had chosen Michael, again and again, through every mistake and every heartbreak. And now, finally, he was learning to choose himself. That was enough. That was everything.